Democrats in Congress are pushing for.
Delays and distractions will not slow our progress because there can be no expiration date on equality.
This is a clear message to the international community that we embed in our Constitution equal rights for women and that there cannot be discrimination based upon gender.
Extending the deadline for the Equal Rights Amendment would also need approval in the Republican-controlled Senate, where it'll likely face opposition.
I'm personally not a supporter.
Some conservatives fear it could lead to more abortions or even outlaw separate-sex bathrooms. As for Heidi Schreck, the playwright, she's expecting twin girls in April.
I want their future to look very different from our past.
She says she hopes to soon show her daughters a U.S. Constitution that guarantees their equality. Heidi Jo Castro, Al Jazeera, Washington.
So you have to get to see what the Constitution means to me at some point. I don't know when Broadway opens up again or when you'll be able to see it, but I think they've recorded it. It's an extraordinary exploration of generations of domestic abuse that Heidi certainly believes, and we do too, that would have been avoided and there would have been justice for had there been an Equal Rights Amendment. I'm going to throw it back to Allison right now, and she's going to introduce the fantastic colleges who have signed on for Campus ERA Day this year. Allison.
Hi, everyone. We have a ton of awesome campuses representing all over the country. So we'd like to extend our welcome to Clemson University, Cornell University, Davidson University, Dickinson High School, Eastern Gateway Community College, Howard University, and Jackson State University.
We are also thrilled to be joined by Kennesaw State University, Mount St. Mary University, Mars Hill University, North Carolina Central University, New York University, and the University of Iowa.
We are also joined by the University of Michigan, University of Pennsylvania, University of Richmond, Trinity Episcopal High School, Wofford College, and Yale University. We're also joined by nonprofit organizations, Generation Ratify, the Bella Abzug Leadership Institute, and Girls for Gender Equality.
So thank you all so much for all of what you've done to get those colleges. That took months of writing across the country for that. Do you want to introduce one of our first panelists now, Alyssa Milano, who has been a true champion of the ERA Coalition, of the Equal Rights Movement, participated with us in our tremendous shadow hearing that led to our actual hearing in the judiciary. Alyssa, we all want to thank you so much for being here today. Catherine?
Yes, so we're joined today by an absolutely inspiring group of panelists. I'd like to introduce Alyssa Milano, who's an actor, activist, and producer. She has been an outspoken member of the Me Too movement and a supporter of ERA ratification. In 2018, to reiterate, she provided testimony at a shadow hearing on the ERA, the first hearing held in the U.S. House of Representatives in 35 years. Milano is an advocate for civic engagement and has pushed efforts to get the vote out during this upcoming election.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Our next panelist is the state chairman was elected to represent 2012. In 2017, she introduced and was instrumental to the passage of a resolution to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment, making Nevada the 36th state to vote to ratify the 1972 ERA. In 2019, she provided testimony at the first official congressional hearing on the ERA in 36 years. Thank you, State Senator Spearman.
Next we have Steve Anderson. Steve Anderson is the Commissioner for Human Rights for the state of Illinois, appointed by Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. He formerly served as a member of the Illinois House of Representatives. During his last session in the Illinois House of Representatives, Anderson was the chief Republican sponsor.
Oh boy.
Did you lose it, Sandy?
I think I did.
Oh, no.
Hang on. I think somebody tried popping in for a message to me, but shoot.
In case you're wondering, we can't read all the messages on your Facebook, just so you know.
You can or you can't?
Cannot. It's too, what, fuzzy and small? So just so you know, your privacy.
Oh, you mean on her email? Oh yeah, and on her, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, this
both,
Zoom
right?
chat? Okay.
We can't read on your screen.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. I'm really trying to get there.
I'm not going anywhere.
Well, what the heck? I was going to try and record this and then I goofed that up too, but anyway, we'll have a little bit of something to play with.
My guess is that they will record it on their Facebook. So
I was just playing. I didn't know you could hear me. You probably heard me crunching on my chips.
no, you
I
never
didn't.
you muted yourself.
Oh, okay. Well, come on. There we go. Is it?
For justice.
There we go. All right, we're back. Now I wonder if I'm having bandwidth problems.
So much. What an incredible group of panelists we have here today. We're going to start with our Grove Fellows, who will do the first round of questions to everyone. We just personally want to say thanks. We've seen you out there in the trenches working so hard in every single way. And here you are with us here tonight. Please go ahead, Catherine. You have the first question.
Yeah. So the first question will go to Alyssa Milano, and it's, do you feel as though the Me Too movement has been a catalyst for support for the ERA? And if you could be so kind to talk about the relationship between these two movements.
Alyssa, we are not hearing you. Your mic is, there we go.
Yes, hi.
Yeah, there we go. Great.
First, I want to thank the ERA Coalition and Hunter College and all the panelists and the incredible fellows for organizing such a special event. For me, the reason why I learned of the Equal Rights Amendment, I think I was like the 80% of the public who thought that women had protections in the Constitution. And I was shocked to find out that they didn't. And through my research, I kept getting this question when I would do press about the Me Too movement, like, what comes next? What comes next? And it was tricky because, I mean, I think we're still learning what comes next with the Me Too movement. And there is no perfect language or rules to follow yet. But to me, this is what comes next. Equality in the Constitution for women. And when I bring this up, people always say, oh, women have protections in the Constitution. And I say, oh, really? What amendment protects women in the Constitution? People say the 14th Amendment. To which my reply is always, the 14th Amendment was written before the 19th Amendment, so clearly they weren't giving us protections before we even had the right to vote. And I think that, this is to pick out the what comes next, I'm not even sure there would have been a Me Too movement or the necessity for a Me Too movement if we were in the Constitution. I think being excluded from the Constitution has given the appearance that we are the less than gender. And so, you know, I'm fighting for the rights to be seen and heard. And I think a lot of that is fighting for the most vulnerable amongst us, but also, you know, just for our unalienable rights, right? I mean, it's kind of crazy now. And there are so many things that I could go into, but I just want to basically just read what the Equal Rights Amendment says, because for those who you know, like McConnell, who seem to be against it, I don't know how anyone can be. I can't hear anything.
That's okay. Go ahead.
There you go.
Go ahead.
Okay, yes. So equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. And maybe even more important than Section 1 is Section 2. The Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. And then Section 3 is this amendment shall take effect 2 years after the date of ratification. So I don't know how anyone could be against that.
Precisely. Thank you so much. As always, Alyssa, you know, brings us right to the point of consideration. How can anybody be against that? Which is constantly what we ask. Allison, you have the next question.
Hi, our next question is for Nevada State Senator Pat Spearman. And the question is, how do you think that the Equal Rights Amendment, as written, as we just heard, will protect all women of multiple intersecting identities, including transgender women? And we'd love to hear a discussion of your thoughts on that.
Yes, that's the easy answer. As I listened to Alyssa talk, and just the discussions that have been taking place about the Equal Rights Amendment, and those on the other side always answer with a one-word, give a one-word answer, and that is no. And I always want to respond, there are no big words here. There are no big words here. There are no big words. There are no, you know, multi-syllables where you have to try to figure out what that means. Is it Latin for something else? There are no big words here. And so it's very easy to understand, and you have to make a conscious effort not to understand that this is about equality. And it's about equality across the board. It's about equality for women, period. It's about putting into the Constitution that gender cannot be used as a reason or a way to discriminate. I always wonder why they want to make something so difficult. And then I have to go back to the fact that I've been a woman all my life. I've been Black all my life. Somebody told me to apply to another race and I got a 2-word answer. And one of the answers was no. So I've been Black all my life, and I'm convinced I will be Black until the day that I die. And so having those two things and being a member of the LGBTQ community, I understand what discrimination means, and I understand what it does to someone. I understand what it does to the personhood of someone who is not secure in who they are and how God made them. And so what we're really talking about here is equality across the board. And for those, as I've said before, for those who have been born in privilege, they don't understand what we're talking about. If they've always used their privilege to enter doors, to go into rooms, to be accepted without having to explain why they're there. They don't understand. They don't get it. Thank God there are some who were born in privilege but still have understood that it's important to make sure that every creature that God has made that walks the face of this earth, especially in this country, and as a veteran, the Equal Rights Amendment, especially especially if they have not served this country in the military. You don't get a right to tell me that we'll not have equality when I put my life on the line sometimes in this country, for this country, and I would not take it back. I gave my life. I would have given my life for this. And so for anyone to say that they are against it and they have not served, I say, give me a call. Call me up and we can discuss it. And I'll explain some things to you, as they would say in Texas.
Thank you so much, Senator Spearman. I see Alyssa and others applauding, right? Anybody brave enough to call Pat Spearman and ask her, about that? She comes from so many angles and rights to demand equality. Diana, you have the next question.
Yeah, so the next question is for Steve Anderson. Being that so many of your Republican counterparts are against the ERA, what do you think has been the difference in your interpretation of the ERA from theirs? What clicked for you that hasn't for others?
So thank you very much for having me on. And by the way, one of the things that I always have to suffer with is going after Pat Spearman. Man, every time, because Nevada got to do it 36, we're 37. So we're always after Pat, and I can never do it as good as Pat does. So thank you, Pat, for being here. But thank you for letting me participate in this. To your question, I would say that there's two things that I have been successful at in changing people's opinions on the Republican side of the equation. The main one is the abortion question, right? Ooh, the big abortion question, big and scary. And there has been a calculated and complete smear job on this issue with the ERA. The idea was back with Phyllis Schlafly was she figured out she probably couldn't sell killing the ERA on things like I want women to be, on a pedestal, that wasn't working real well. So she picked something that she thought would work really well, which is to tie it to this concept of abortion, which a lot of people have very good faith, genuine opinions about. Problem with it is it's a lie. It's a bold-faced lie, this association between abortion and the ERA. They have nothing to do with each other. What Alyssa Milano, she read it. Did you hear anything in there about the right to abortion? Yeah, there wasn't anything, and there isn't anything. So what I've spent my time on, and in fact, when I was running the bill in Illinois, the hard part was spending a lot of time with my Republican colleagues just to break it down. There's an old saying in politics, which is, if you have to explain, you've lost. Well, the problem is something like the ERA, once you get past the 24 words of it, if you have to break something down, a lie that somebody else created, it takes a lot of work. And so what I did was I took them hand in hand, one by one, to be able to get to change people's mind. I used my own reputation for that. I used their belief in what I had to say and that I'm not feeding them a line to be able to do that. And the other thing that was so important was the simple passion for the simple prospect of the Equal Rights Amendment. And when you show them how important it is, because if you take that abortion question out of it, how in God's name can anybody be against this? Anybody, unless you really do want to hold women back. I suppose if that's your position, all right, then I guess you should be against it. But assuming most people, if not all people, aren't feeling that way, man, there's nothing left but the passion for a good thing, for the cause, of elevating all of us to an equal station. I've often talked about, people ask me, why are you into this? Are you doing it for your daughter, for your wife? Well, sure, yes, but I have a son too. I'm doing it for him too. Because what happens is when the only people making decisions are old white guys who look like me, the only source of their information is the background that I grew up with, right? Probably pretty similar to a bunch of other old white guys. However, if you bring in people of color, if you bring in women, if you bring in the LGBTQ community to that same boardroom, the universe of ideas that people can come up with explodes. It just explodes with opportunity. So instead of figuring that I got all the answers, which I know I don't, I know that we all, though, do together. So that's why this is so important. And thank you again for having me on.
Steve, thanks so much. And we're so glad you're on our side. We really appreciate that.
We need you, Steve.
Thank you.
Right. We definitely need you. He's terrific. Kieran, you've got the next question.
Yes, my question goes out to Jennifer Carroll Foy. So Virginia had a Democratic majority in the House of Delegates and the state Senate when the ERA was ratified. Do you think states with Republican majorities have a chance at ratification soon?
If you could unmute.
Okay, there we go.
There we go. Great. Great.
The Zoom lifestyle. Yes. So I am optimistic that states with Republican majorities can get it done. I am optimistic because I have to be. We can't just stop at 38 states. We need the 39th and the 40th and the 41st, and we need to continue on because the fight hasn't been won, right? And we want to send a message with resounding answer that women's equality is paramount. It's at forefront. We're not going away. We won't take a back seat. We won't take no for an answer. We are here and we will be heard. And so in order to do that, we have to know that every single state that has not ratified is up for grabs. And we need to treat every single one as if we can win, right? When you get into a fight, you never go into a fight being defeated. You never go into a fight thinking, I'm going to lose this one. You go in armed and ready and as best prepared as you possibly can. You arm yourself with the facts. You galvanize with the rest of the advocates. You have a lobbying plan, and then you just keep going. I mean, I'm gonna be honest. It's Pat Spearman and Carolyn Maloney and Bettina. Those people actually motivated me to know that this can happen, right? That we can do it. I mean, I couldn't imagine what Pat was thinking when, she brought this up, and I know she heard the same things I heard. It was a dead issue. No one's talking about it. Committee chairs haven't changed. It's just the Republican or anti, ERA stronghold is there. So it's just not going to happen, but it doesn't matter because if she wouldn't have done it, then Illinois wouldn't have done it, then we wouldn't have done it, and we wouldn't be here on this call right now. So we can't have a self-defeatist attitude. We have to go into this knowing that we are on the right side of history, that we have the moral high ground. We are standing up for 165 million women and girls across this country who are waiting for their constitutional equality. So once you know that and you're armed with that information, then that can help to sustain you in this fight because it is difficult. It's not easy. Constantly combating misinformation, outright lies, personal attacks on you, your character, what you're doing, all these things, because it's that important. Very rarely in your lifetime do you get to do something that will affect the United States Constitution. But Congresswoman Maloney knew that. That's why she kept putting it in year after year, being told no and no and no. And she looked at me one year and said, Jen, you're going to do this. And I said, you're damn right we are. We're going to get it done. And that's exactly what we did. So it doesn't matter. You can't look at the makeup. Will it make the fight more difficult? Absolutely. But even when you have Democratic majorities, some fights still aren't won, right? Just because people have D's beside their name don't always mean that they're with you. So I just want to be very, clear with that. I mean, I heard it from Democratic peers this, last session. They called themselves pro-life. I called them anti-choice. And they said, Jen, I can't support the Equal Rights Amendment. And that was a Democrat. Right. And so it's not always about that. It's about whether people are going to be the right side of policy. If they want to be on the right side of history, if they really want to believe women, trust women, stand with women, then they will support the Equal Rights Amendment.
Jennifer, thank you so much. It was incredible being in Virginia with you that day that Virginia became the 38th state. That was our second try. Well, many tries, but the second in a row, second year in a row. And Bettina Hager, our DC director, and I said that the downtown Richmond Hilton was our second home. We were there so many times, but you did a terrific job carrying that through. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. And with those twin babies too, did it while raising babies and carrying them to events and all. Catherine, you have the next question.
Yeah, so the next question is for Linda Coverly, and it is, what are the current legal challenges that the efforts to ratify the ERA face, and how can these be overcome?
So thank you so much for the question, and it's a real thrill to be here with this panel. I'm reminded last year at Campus ERA Day, I was actually in a big conference room at my law firm with a whole bunch, dozens of law students who had joined us for the day. I'm future law students on this call too, because what we're doing when we amend the Constitution is a law thing. And when I got involved in this fight, it was partly because, well, it was actually at the suggestion of one of the leaders of our law firm who heard a story on NPR about the terrific efforts of Senator Spearman in Nevada to ratify the ERA in Nevada. And he realized that it wasn't ratified in Illinois and figured that out, I think, for the first time and said, we need to get involved in that. There are some really important legal challenges, and that's what where I've been spending most of my time relating to the ERA. The most obvious challenge that you've already heard mentioned here is what some call the deadline or the time limit on ratification. When Congress adopted the ERA in 1972 and sent it to the states to be ratified, it sent the amendment along with some language that put a 7-year limit on ratification. And later, when it became clear that it wasn't going to happen by the 7th year, that time limit was extended by another 3 years to 1982. So there are a couple of issues that are associated with the deadline. One is, can it be removed? And the answer is yes. And that's what Congress has been working on. That's what our lobbying efforts in Congress have been focused on in the last year. Congress put that time limit in the preamble to the amendment. It's not part of the language that all the states have been voting on. So, and because of that, that means Congress can change it. If it chooses, a later Congress can go back and change it. And that's what the House has already done, and there's a companion bill pending in the Senate right now that is sponsored by Senators Cardin and Murkowski. So, so that effort can succeed. It's an appropriate effort, and it's completely legitimate, and it's within the power of Congress. And if Congress were to actually do that, there would be very little that anyone, including the courts, could say about that, because ultimately it's Congress's decision whether a timeline like that should be in place at all. The other way to challenge the time limit, and this is happening too, is to challenge it in court. The process for amending the Constitution is set out in Article 5 of the Constitution, which says that you can amend the Constitution if Congress adopts a proposed amendment, and that amendment is ratified by 3/4 of the states. And the Article 5 says that the amendment becomes part of the Constitution as soon as it is ratified by 3/4 of the states. It doesn't say anything about time limits or 7 years or anything like that. The practice of putting a time limit on amendments didn't actually start until the 20th century with the Prohibition Amendment. And our most recent amendment to the Constitution is called the Madison Amendment. It was actually proposed by James Madison, and it took 203 years to ratify. It didn't have a time limit on it. So the argument to make, and the argument that is being made now in lawsuits, including one in Washington, D.C. that was brought by the Attorneys General of Illinois, Virginia, and Nevada, argues that the time limit that's on the ERA can't possibly stand in the way of the effectiveness of the amendment, because the effectiveness of the amendment depends on the Constitution. So that's the argument, and that lawsuit's pending right now and is going to be heard by the court later this year. So that's probably the most significant legal issue. There's also an argument about a handful of states that actually tried to take back a ratification in the 1970s. And those states, there are 5 of them. 4 of them tried to rescind a ratification, and 1 of them just tried to limit the ratification earlier. And on that issue, the precedent is very strong. There's really good historical precedent for the idea that once a state ratifies, it can't take the ratification back. The state's only job is to either ratify or not. It's a yes or no question, and it either happened or it didn't. And just because a later legislature disagreed with what an earlier one did, they can't take it back. In fact, the 14th Amendment became part of our Constitution at a time when 2 of the states that had voted to ratify it had also voted to try to rescind their ratification. So that's a very powerful historical precedent for the idea that rescission doesn't work. So those are the 2 big legal issues. There are very strong arguments on the pro-ERA side of them, and you hear those arguments both in Congress and in the courts.
Thank you, Linda. We are so glad to have her as chair of our legal task force. You know, that's our law school education, and there are Grow Fellows who are interested in going to law school, so they'll be tracking you down afterwards. Thank you so much, Linda. Jessica, you have the next question.
Yeah, so this next question is for Rosie. What are the similarities and differences between older and younger generations fighting for the ERA?
Yeah, so this is an awesome question. And to kind of start off, I think in the ERA movement, the one thing that really unites people is that we want to ratify the ERA. And then outside of that, there are so many differences of opinions, whether it's strategy for the actual ratification of the amendment, why we need it, what it will do, what issues need to be brought up in the conversation. So I think that every person and organization and community all has a different role to play in its ratification. And I think like that could look like many different things, whether that be battling in court or grassroots organizing in states that have yet to ratify. And the younger population in general and young people, I think what's really important is to bring our sense of radicalness. And when I say radicalness, I mean how youth are the ones that are more likely to take risks. We're more likely to upset lawmakers and bring up controversial issues and even get ourselves in some hot water with some other ERA activists. I think that young people have been the leaders of social justice movements forever, even in the Equal Rights Amendment and the movement to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. And today we see it with movements like March for Our Lives, the US Youth Climate Strike. You see kids that are taking these risks, calling out their legislators, putting their bodies in spaces of power. And this Generation Ratify had a few things rolled up our sleeve for direct actions that we were going to take, such as occupying Senate offices, some fun banner drops. Unfortunately, that is on hold until it is safe to be within 6 feet of people again. But definitely that is where I think the youth have their role, and that's what it's moving towards in the Equal Rights Amendment. And then building off of that, I think a big difference between older generations and younger generations are their willingness to talk about different issues. As I was saying earlier, young people really like to push boundaries and push buttons. And I think this comes down to some of the issues that we talk about. One of my biggest critiques of the ERA movement is how sometimes issues are dismissed or kind of put under the carpet, such as abortion, such as the expansion of rights for the LGBTQIA+ community. I feel like a lot of times those are overlooked and kind of put to the side because those are the more controversial ones, and those are the ones that typical anti-ERA legislators are openly against and openly oppose. So I think what is special about the youth voice and something that we've been really trying to do with Generation Ratify is to have those uncomfortable conversations and get the youth voice to bring out those issues. And honestly, keeping away those more controversial issues, that's incredibly dangerous because those are the exact reasons why young people are fighting for the ERA and why we all care about the ERA, and they must be put at the forefront of our movement if we want the ERA to do what we really intend of it.
Thank you so much, Rosie. When I first met the group, we were at the University of Virginia Law School in Richmond, and a group of the Generation Ratify young people came up. They are putting our feet to the fire every single day, making us live up to our commitment to the work that needs to be done. So Rosie, sophomore in high school, you know, I want to see you 10 years from now in the White House, right? You know, what, you may be a little young for that, but you're headed in that direction. Headed in that direction. Thank you. And because of you all, we will have the ERA. So thanks so much for the work that you're doing. Karen, you have the next introduction.
Yes, my next question is for Congresswoman Maloney. How was the conversation around the ERA changed since you first arrived in Congress in 1992?
Thank you for that question. And I'm thrilled to be here, honored to be here with the Generation Ratify and the Campus Action Day and all of these outstanding leaders and across America that have brought us to this point, particularly the ERA Coalition, Carol Jenkins and Jessica Newworth. You've done an incredible job, and we're so grateful for your leadership. And the leadership of Pat Spearman and really Carol Foy. And I understand she's running for governor, and Steve Anderson. It would not have happened without your leadership making it happen. Well, the way it's happened is that it's a serious, the conversation has changed because we're going to ratify it this year, and it's going to be part of the Constitution. And we're very close to achieving that. So the conversation has changed dramatically. When I first went to Congress, it was treated like, oh, this will never happen. And we had last year the first congressional hearing in 36 years. The first one in 36 years. We had some shadow hearings that Alyssa Milano testified out and brought such great support for it, and others spoke out at it. And we continued to raise the issue, but within the halls of Congress, it was not taken as a reality. Well, having a hearing places you on the agenda of Congress. And what led to that was a Democratic majority in the House after many years. And what led to the Democratic majority was, I would say, the Women's March, all of them, and the Time's Up, Me Too, all of these movements that helped elect a record 135 women to Congress. And that made a huge difference. Not only did we have the hearing, we passed it. We passed the bill to take the time limit out of it. And to just give an illustration of how the conversation has changed, I remember being at a hearing where they were talking about a woman's right to affordable access to contraception. And I noticed there wasn't one woman on the panel. So I asked the question, where a woman was as qualified as the men? And I said, every woman is more qualified to talk about her health and her body than any man. But it was an afterthought. It wasn't thought about as the first thing or the second thing or the third thing. Well, now we, with 131 women, when we decide to back something, we have a stronger collective voice. We're much stronger. In this Congress, we also passed a bill that I authored years ago for paid leave for the birth of a child, parental paid leave, in the House and Senate, signed into law, paid sick leave, daycare. We even passed the women's, I always thought it was hard to empower women if you didn't even recognize them. I found out it's the only museum looking at the substantial contributions of women, not in Washington, but in the whole country. So a number of forces are coming together. Pat Spearman, you inspired us beyond belief, as did Illinois with Senator Anderson, and then Carol Foy in Virginia. It was so exciting to see the 38th state ratify it. And now we're involved in these legal challenges that Linda Conley has pointed out. But it's so important. Equal pay for equal work. When I went to Congress in 1992, women were paid 80 cents to the dollar. Well, guess what they're paid today? 80 cents to the dollar. And I did a report when I chaired the Joint Economic Committee that looked at what does this mean to women's lives? And this underpayment led to lower pensions, lower Social Security, lower IRAs, everything else, so that women are the largest group of people living in poverty in our country. So I truly believe we will never have equal pay for equal work until we have the Equal Rights Amendment, because then you can enforce it. You can enforce it in the law of the land. We've passed many bills, but they haven't been enforced. So passing it is critically, critically important. One other example, our rights should not be left up to the whims of who's the president or who's the speaker or who's got the majority. It should be bedrock in our Constitution. I had the privilege of working with the great Patricia Schroeder on a bill that banned female genital mutilation, mutilating a woman's body. Well, this bill was overturned last year in a Michigan court. Can you imagine? Unbelievable. If you had an equal rights amendment, they wouldn't even think of mutilating a woman. Why should women be mutilated? It's just terrible. So there's so many examples. I could talk all day. I just want to tell you that I am thrilled to be here with the young people at Hunter College and other panelists. And I thank Linda Conley for her words. She will be defending us before the Supreme Court soon. We will all be there with her. And I truly do believe that it will be added to the Constitution, and at long last, equal will truly mean equal. We've waited long enough, and we need to be in the Constitution, or our rights will never, ever be protected.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Maloney. I'm with you. I believe it. We all believe that. That's going to happen. And Linda, I can see you before the Supreme Court right now, right? So that'll be terrific. We're going to open up the questions now to some of our colleges who have joined us. And Courtney Twig from Mount St. Mary's College in Maryland has the first question. Courtney, are you there? She's joining now, I'm told. So thanks so much for being with us. These students have had tremendous, we've done Zoom training with them. They've had tremendous questions. So Courtney, thanks so much for being with us today. And you've got the first question from our colleges.
Awesome. So I'm really excited to be here. My question is, it's for all the panelists. Why do you all think it continues to take this long to grant equal legal rights to women who now make up more than half of the American population? In a world created by men and for men, is the answer as black and white as the patriarchy, or is the answer much more convoluted than that?
Whoa, the patriarchy. Who wants to start with the patriarchy? Alyssa, you must start with it.
I think Steve should start.
I can
Okay, well, we'll give you first crack at it because I know in social media you have a few words to say about the patriarchy.
Yeah, I mean, I've often wondered this as well, but I do think that there is a system that's been put in place that is not one where women are given the same opportunity to succeed. And whether that be the patriarchy or, something else, I think what we're seeing and feeling right now is this shift, this social shift that usually will come before a legal shift. So, I mean, I'm interested to hear what Steve has to say about the patriarchy and if he thinks that is actually the reason why someone wouldn't want, women to have.
Yeah,
equality.
Steve, you have the floor, Steve.
Sure. So I think that the answer is yes and no to the original question of, is it just blatant sexism or is it something a little bit more subtle? I think it's both, really. There are people out there, there are men out there who, just have no interest in women having any power. They prefer to keep it to themselves. A wonderful advocate, Eileen Davis from Virginia, often quotes a quote that says, power will never give itself up voluntarily. So there are people who simply are not willing to do that. But I think that there's a more subtle answer too. One that I think a lot of men probably would say, I'm not a sexist, I'm not a sexist. And yet that's exactly kind of where their votes end up. And that is I've always believed there's kind of this conservative mantra of tried and true. They're not progressive in the true meaning of that term. Tried and true. We've always done it this way. My father did it this way. My grandfather did it this way. And everything was fine. Of course, because they're a bunch of white males. Everything is fine. So I think that what happens is this tried and true mentality, even if they don't mean it, even if they're not doing it because they're out and out sexists, that concept is, why are we changing everything? A lot of these people, a lot of these men, I think that they're very afraid, quite frankly, of how society changes. And this is another piece of that amongst many. So I think when that happens and when they get, quite frankly, afraid of what this is doing to a society they thought they understood, they pull back. You know, and I think that's where you get the resistance from.
Right. Exactly, and I think Pat Spearman has a few things to add to that too. We've got the trio here. Yeah, Pat. If you can, Pat, do you want to? Oh, there we go. I think your mic is off again. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and Steve, I have the unfortunate privilege of following you now. So,
thank you.
And, you know, and I think what Steve just said is correct, because it's complex, and part of the complexity has to do with religion and the way people have interpreted the quote Bible and any religious writing in the world, and most of what you read in the Bible, that's because that's where patriarchy comes from. You know, the patriarchs of the religion, the patriarchs of the faith. And what the old-fashioned interpretation always did was it subjugated women in everything, in every way. And so there was always this immediate fallback on, well, that's not what the Bible says. The Bible says that women, you know, should walk 3 steps behind, you know, their husbands. And I'm like, okay, show that to me in Hebrew, or show that to me in Greek. What you know, if you're in the Old Testament, show it to me in Hebrew. They can't do it. If you're in the New Testament, show it to me in Greek. They can't do it. So I think part of that has been falling back on a misrepresentation of what they say that the words of God are. And so, you know, combating that has been a consequence, or the successful combating that has been a consequence of more women going into ministry. You know, when I was in seminary, I think we had, out of the whole class, there were probably a whole class of about 30 people. There were maybe about 5 women. And now, as I understand it, there are more women percentage-wise in seminaries. The other thing, and I want to say this about what Congresswoman Maloney said, because I don't want us to miss that. When we start talking about why the changes take place, the other complexity of that is associated with how effective we are and how engaged we are with democracy. What happened in Congress this time would not have happened if we had not changed some seats. What happened in Virginia this year would not have happened if we had not changed some seats. I know for a fact that in Nevada, it would not have happened in 2017 if we had not changed some seats. And so the fight for equality has to do with, yes, helping people to understand we're not second-class citizens. And the fight for equality must include getting to the ballot box and understanding that people who do not take our equality as personal and as important as their equality, they should not be trying to represent everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Senator.
Can I just add one thing to that? Can I just add one thing? I just want to add one thing, which is that I don't think that we will be able to really truly reach full equality in a meaningful way if the men are not on board with this. So all the men that are listening, who are watching, we need you in this fight. We need your help. We need you to fight, not because we're your moms or your wives or your daughters or your girlfriends. We need you to fight because it's our inalienable rights. So please, please, please join us in this.
Congresswoman, you wanted to?
Yes. 2020 is the 100th anniversary of women gaining the right to vote. And some people have said we are celebrating when women were given the right to vote. They did not give us anything. It was a brutal fight from beginning to end. And they were put in prison, force-fed. I had an ancestor who was put in an insane asylum because she thought that women should have the right to vote. She must be insane. And I know we will succeed because the obstacles we face are far less than what they faced. Just incredible obstacles. They fought and they got it. The reason we passed and ratified and removed the bad language in the Congress is because we elected 133 women and like-minded men who supported the Equal Rights Amendment, and with a female speaker who not only supported it with her words, but in her heart. And Carol Foy, she stood on the backs of many women and men who fought for her right to go, and the right of any woman to go to VMI. and she got in there and fought and became a leader, got herself elected, and she has the same strategy that we all need. At this point, if someone doesn't think women should have the right to have equality and to have equal opportunity, then in my opinion, I believe we have to primary them or challenge them and remove them from office. That's exactly what happened to this Congress. We had 133 women, the largest majority ever in history, run against conservative Republicans and conservative Democrats who did not believe in these ideas that women should be treated equally, and we removed them from office. So Carol Foy told me all the people that were blocking them, they removed them, or most of them, from office. So it comes down to raw power. As State Senator Anderson said, no one gives up power easily. So this is a fight. This is a fight for our rights, and there will be opposition, and it will be deep and it will be strong. But our support, our grassroots, our hearts and our minds will be stronger. I truly believe that in 2020 we will prevail and we will become part of the Constitution, and equal will truly mean just that. Equal.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. And thank you, Courtney, for that question. Provocative, got some great answers from that. We have another student, from Dylan Erickson from Clemenson College in South Carolina. Dylan, I think we're promoting you to, there we are. Dylan is with us, so you can ask your question. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you so much. So my name is Dylan Erickson. I'm a senior at Clemson University in South Carolina. And like the rest of the country, the citizens of South Carolina largely support constitutional protections against discrimination on the basis of sex. And in our state Senate, we've even had a bipartisan push for the state to ratify the amendment. But at the same time, we're represented by people like Lindsey Graham, who's the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and has gone on record vocalizing his opposition to the ERA, both for legal reasons, but also because of like what Representative Anderson talked about, the emphasis on how abortion relates to the ERA, which is something he adamantly opposes. So my question, and again, this really goes to everyone, has two parts. The first is why an elected official like Senator Graham would continue to oppose the ERA despite bipartisan support in his state. And second, how we as constituents can engage in meaningful and productive conversations with those types of officials about ratification.
Delegate Carol Foy, do you want to tackle that first?
Sure. Thank you for that question. So it kind of relates to the question that was posed a little earlier. I oftentimes ask myself also, like, how could someone or people disagree with something as fundamentally and morally correct as women's equality? And so I kind of think of it as if the same reason people discriminate against people, for example, or me, because I'm African American, they discriminate me because I'm a woman, they discriminate against the LGBTQ plus community. It's because I think people look at things as if it's a pie, right? And there's a finite amount that can go around. And they look at it as if I give you something, then I'm giving up something, right? So if I give you equal pay, that means my pay may not be as substantial. I may not get enough. When I wanted to go to Virginia Military Institute, and I was in one of the first class of women to go, men didn't want me there. Some of them said because of legacy. Some of them said that, you know, women were just biologically inferior to men. But then there were some, in the essence, they didn't want me there because me being there took a spot of another male, right? And so when you think of it more in that way, people really oftentimes operate out of self-interest. They operate out of their pocketbook. They operate out of just self-preservation. So I think of it that way. And some people say that might not be the best way to look at it, but it's a way to me to take some of the other things out of it, like the angst and the hatred and the bigotry and the sexism and the misogyny. Not saying that doesn't exist, because it does, but fundamentally people just believe that if I give up something, if I give you equal rights, then I'm giving up something. There always has to be, in order for there to be a hierarchy, someone has to be at the bottom. Right? And so that's something you see people play and do very well, making sure there's someone at the bottom. If it's not African Americans, it's Mexicans. If it's not Mexicans, then it's Muslims. If it's not Muslims, it's someone, right? And so when I think of it like that, That's what we're really talking about. And so it's hard to have conversations with people when they're all about self-interest and self-preservation. So one of the things that Congresswoman Maloney was talking about was my motto for 2017 was, 2018 was, when we did not pass the Equal Rights Amendment because of some Republicans, it was, we can have disagreements about, you know, education, transportation, but we can't have disagreement about my equality. And so if I can't change your mind, then I will change your seat. And I just kept it real simple. There's no need to negotiate.
You're getting some snaps for that, you know, delegate.
We're not going to talk about it. It is that simple. So you just take them out. I mean, that's it. You just take them out. Some people will not move. They will not move. They will not you can't rationalize with them. And women's fundamental equality, I don't think that's something you should. So I just say you find a wonderful candidate that believes in the same things that you believe in. You get behind them, you support them, and make sure they get successfully over the finish line, then we don't have to have these conversations.
So Steve, do you have your hand raised? And Alyssa, very quickly, we have another student after.
To your question, Dylan, one of the easiest ways to answer that is simply that they're watching out for their own back. Like Delegate Foy said, it's self-interest in this case in keeping their seat. It's, you know, the explanation I have to go through to say why abortion isn't tied to the ERA is long and complex. The explanation that Lindsey Graham has to go through is simple. He goes, it's about abortion and I'm against abortion. And then a bunch of Republicans say, oh, yeah, me too. End of story. So for him, it's easy money, or easy, not money, but, you know, easy play on the airwaves. His base will listen to him. They'll agree with him. They're not informed. And it's as simple as that. I mean, he may not believe it. I have no idea. But I know he's looking at his numbers and saying, this is the way to stay in my seat.
Yeah, I was also going to say, it's politics, you know, and as soon as we politicize something, we dehumanize it as far as issues go. And I do want to say, Dylan, first of all, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And the thing that you can do, don't ever, ever underestimate your value and what it means to use your own platform to spread awareness. And that also includes making phone calls to your representatives. Every single politician that I have spoken to, when I ask, what can people do? Those phone calls make a difference, you know? And then the other thing I would say is, I don't know, you know, like, know your audience, right? I mean, Lindsey Graham is a Republican, you know, a lot of Republicans, you know, are only concerned with the economy. So, you know, the Equal Rights Amendment is also an economic issue. You know, when women make more in the workforce, our economy is better. Gender equality would boost the economy by 4.3 trillion over a decade. So, you know, there's lots of reasons. But
Great.
don't ever underestimate using your voice, the power that you have.
Thanks, Alyssa, and thanks, Dylan, so much for your question and for being here. Our next student
I could
from
just say really briefly, the best way to answer Lindsey, who knows how he stands on any issue or how he makes his decision, but the best route to get past his opposition to the ERA, I would say, is to support Jamie Harrison, who's running against him. It's that simple. If you can't change his mind, change his seat. Equality is equality. Everyone should be supporting it. It's just fairness.
Okay, thank you, Congresswoman. Yeah, primary then, yeah, exactly. Our next student is from Pennsylvania, Madeleine Guerra, the University of Pennsylvania. Thanks, Madeleine, for being with us today. There we are. Thank you. Hi, good to see you.
My name is Madeleine Guerra. I'm a graduate student at the University of Pennsylvania and living in West Philadelphia. In Pennsylvania, one of our senators, Bob Casey, has endorsed the resolution, while Senator Pat Toomey has not. And he has repeatedly voted against the Paycheck Fairness Act and against the reauthorization of VAWA. But we cannot, unfortunately, vote him out anytime soon. I wanted to ask Senator Spearman, how were you able to work with Republican legislators in your state to see that the ERA is a truly bipartisan issue. And as the resolution is meeting the Senate, how will proponents are planning to get those like Toomey on board?
So in 2015, when I first brought the bill, it didn't get out of committee. And I was up for re-election in 2016, and I ran on ratifying the ERA. And one of the reasons I wanted to do that is because I wanted everyone to know how serious I was about making sure that Nevada fits the world. This is a place where inequality cannot stay. The other thing that I wanted to do was I needed to make sure that my win would be significant. And I think I won that year, I think 2016, I think I won 69% of the vote. And so it was, Democrats and Republicans. And I wanted to make sure that that happened because I could then go back and say, my win was not a squeaker. And there are people at least in Senate District 1 in Nevada who believe in this. The other thing that I wanted to do, and I went back to some of my colleagues who pulled it's about symbolism and it's about, abortion. And so when I made my statement on the floor in 2017, I took apart the whole argument about symbolism. I said, those of you who are married, if you look at your left hand, your third finger, that is not your spouse sitting on your hand. It is a symbol that somewhere you have a spouse. And every day in this chamber, what we do, we stand after the prayer, we stand and we turn and we put our hand across our heart and we pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it is a symbol. And so don't tell me that symbols are not important. And I just took apart that argument. Now, there were still a lot of people who just didn't want to vote for it. And I say someone convinced against their will is of the same opinion still. I'm going to go with the goers and do with the doers. And so those who want to go with us for equality, that's what we're going to do. And I worked on two women, one in the Senate and the other one in the Assembly, because their strongest, they wanted to vote for it, but they were convinced by some of their constituents that it was about abortion. And once I took that argument apart from them and said to them these words, there are a lot of people, this is one time in history where we can affect for generations to come. And so what I'm asking you to do in your heart of hearts, stand with me on the right side of history and don't stand with others who are misinformed and want to stay that way, because you're either going to stand on the right side of history or you're going to stand on the sidelines and watch us make history. So It was a matter really of going directly at the arguments.
Thanks so much, Madeleine, for that question, and Pat, Senator Spearman for as always, a great answer. Our next student from Washington, D.C. is Amina Sanusi from Howard University. Amina, as you get promoted to question rank here on our screen.
Hello.
Hi, great to see you.
Hi, my name is Amina Sanusi. I'm a junior at Howard University. So my question is more directed towards Congresswoman Maloney. We are in the middle of a pandemic, but we're also in the middle of getting legislation passed to remove the time limit from the ERA. So how can we work to get the Senate's attention at this time to get the ERA to move forward on the floor?
Well, I think that what we're doing right now, bringing awareness in their districts and with people that they represent. We all listen to our constituents. That's our job. So all of us have an opportunity to reach out to our legislators and support their decision in support of the ERA, or try to inform them and educate them. As Senator Spearman so eloquently said, she kept using arguments to put the word forward. I have great respect for any bill that can get that fragile flower of consensus and pass the United States Congress. It's very difficult. It would have, if it was easy, we would have passed it years ago. And we have a huge challenge in the Senate. McConnell, who is the leader of the Senate, has said he will not support it. So that's a huge hurdle, as well as we do not have a lot of bipartisan support in the Senate. We had strong bipartisan support in the House. We had a large contingent of Republicans who voted for it. But we just have to keep chipping away. We have to keep working on it and keep informing. But it's very important. Everybody has a role to play, particularly if you are represented by a senator who does not support it. Then I would be in their offices as soon as the corona quarantine is over, asking for their support and trying to educate them, as Pat Spearman did so eloquently and effectively, and as Senator Anderson did so eloquently and effectively in Illinois. So it's not easy. I've been trying for a long time, but we're getting very close right now. It was thrilling to have that first hearing and to have that first vote removing the deadline. And now we need to achieve it in the Senate. It's a separate body. They have their own politics, their own hierarchy, and they listen to each other. So getting a pro-ERA friend to talk to other senators is very helpful too.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Congresswoman. Good advice. Diana, I'm going to go to you. As you may know, we're on Facebook Live, as we are in our Zoom home. We're also running Facebook Live. And you have a question that came in from Facebook Live, Diana?
Yes, so Jean Ellen Russell on Facebook wants to know what can be done nationally to help support the ERA.
So we have, and also Rosie, right after that. So Linda Coberly.
Sure, a couple of thoughts. First of all, one of the things I learned being fairly new to legislative work when we were working on the Illinois bill was that legislators do want to hear from their own constituents. Not from other people. And that was really important, and it was an important learning for me. We also learned a lot about making sure that the movement was intersectional. That was also extremely important. One thing you can do is, if you live in a jurisdiction where you're represented by someone who supports the ERA, and so you're calling your representatives isn't going to really move the ball, you can use your platform, your networks, your contacts to talk to people in other places. Share conversations, share information, share the information, the recording of what we're doing today. Educate them in their jurisdictions, in their districts, so that they will call their own legislators, because at the end of the day, from the legislative process, there's no substitute for having people call their own legislators. In terms of the litigation, as Rosie knows, there's an effort going on to have amicus briefs filed is basically help the court to understand a perspective that the parties don't represent. It's a pretty common thing in important lawsuits to have people file what's called amicus briefs, or friend of the court briefs. The ERA Coalition is doing a brief. I'm working on that one, and we hope to have lots of different organizations across the country joining onto that brief, and you can contact us if you're interested in doing that through the ERA Coalition and get that information. And then Rosie and Generation Ratify are working on an amicus brief to represent the youth voice, which I think is so important in this conversation.
Rosie, you get the last word, as well you should, no offense to any of our other participants, but high school sophomore with a national organization fighting for the ERA. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, so we are working on our own amicus brief. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of ways that people can get involved with crafting that. I am learning so much about that process, and I'm guided by some amazing educated adults. But what you can be doing is calling representatives. And in fact, Generation Ratify is setting up phone banks where you can call other people to call their representatives. And that is something that we're working on coming out with. We expect it to be done in a couple of weeks. But also, Generation Ratify also has a big focus on electing pro-ERA candidates, and we are definitely focused on the Senate. Although the fight is not over, the election is something to look to, because if we can elect that pro-ERA majority to the Senate, it'll make our fight that much easier.
Right.
And this is text banking, phone banking. We have a lot of opportunities on our website, generationratify.org. We have a campaign called Elect Equal Rights, all about electing pro-ERA senators. The Senate is our focus this year. But lots of opportunities to take action.
Yeah, Rosie, I urge everybody to go to generationratify.org. You'll learn a lot there about organizing online, since we're all online. I want to thank everybody so much for this wonderful conversation. The broadcast is not completely over yet, but I'm going to turn it back over to Catherine, I think, who's got an important message for us. But our sincere thanks to all of you for being on and for sharing your insight and for the hard work that you do on the ground, in Congress, in the houses.
Hi, I'm Senator Ben Cardin of Maryland. Thank you for your interest in how and why we need to guarantee women in America equal rights. Around the world, history has shown that how a society treats its women is a barometer for how or if a country succeeds. America is the only modern democracy in the world that does not have equal rights for women written into their Constitution. As our country navigates through the worst pandemic to strike in a century, we see more vividly how inequities can have dire consequences. Vulnerable communities are being disproportionately impacted in what is truly a circumstance of life or death, particularly seen along divisions of race and class. Women, especially women of color, who continue to face inequalities, are the majority of the impoverished in this country and are disproportionately impacted by the economic hardship caused by COVID-19. Women are especially vulnerable in this crisis due to domestic violence when home is a dangerous place and shelters and other support services are less accessible under the current circumstances. America was built on a promise of equal rights, but to this day our Constitution does not explicitly prohibit discrimination against women. I know, like most people, you may be surprised to find out that in 2020, equality for women is not part of the Constitution. Well, since 1972, actually long before that, we've been trying to get this done. As of this year, we finally have 38 states that have ratified an amendment to the Constitution, the Equal Rights Amendment. And momentum is building in Congress to act and pass an amendment that I authored to remove the arbitrary deadline that was set long ago. This is where you come in. The ERA represents one key element in the efforts to establish a more just society and end second-class status for women. We need college students to raise their voices and demand their members of Congress support the ERA. We need you to urge your family and your friends to get involved. We need you to help correct the omission of the past so that our nation's future can be more just and more equitable. Thank you, and please stay safe.
Thank you so much, Senator Cardin. And now, Kieran, I'm throwing it to you.
Yes. So I would just like to take this opportunity to thank the panelists for joining us this evening. The panel was engaging, vibrant, and motivating. Organizing and executing this event into fruition was a wonderful experience, and we are glad we were able to reach so many students and faculties across the country. We truly appreciate the time and energy that you devote to making the event such a great success. It's inspiring that you're all using your platforms to advocate for the rights of women and girls all over the country, and we have made a lot of progress in the fight for equal rights. We intend to go all the way. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Jessica Sirico, explaining this beautiful thing you have on your screen.
Yeah, so as we come close to wrapping up this wonderful event, we encourage everyone to visit www.eracoalition.org/advocacy map, as you could see on the screen. And using the advocacy map, you could look up your senators and urge them to support Senate Joint Resolution 6 to remove the deadline for the ratification of the ERA. And me and the other fellows want to reiterate our thanks to all of our panelists and everyone for participating and urge you to take this important action to further the ERA.
Thank you very, very much. Okay, and I think that that is it for us. We go out with, I don't know, anybody too young or too old to know about Betty, the rock pop group. They have created this particular song for us to close out our day today. Again, thank you for all of our panelists, for our Grove students, to Bettina Hager, my co-leader for this program, who did a fabulous job this year with this program. Now introducing Betty to take us out, and thank you. We'll see you again next year with the ERA.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amy.
I'm Elizabeth.
I'm Allie. And together, we're the band Betty.
We know this is the time we need to come together.
And it's time to make a difference.
If I say nothing, do nothing, close my eyes, pretend to see nothing, nothing's gonna change, nothing's gonna break, nothing's gonna give, nothing's gonna make a difference, nothing's gonna make a difference. Nothing's gonna make a difference.
Friends and sisters. We are all equal in rights and dignity. Rights and dignity.
If I help no one, hear no one, close my eyes, pretend to hurt no one, no one's gonna change, no one's gonna break, no one's gonna give, no one's gonna make a difference, no one's gonna make a difference. No one's gonna make a difference.
Friends and sisters. To all the little girls, never doubt. When they go low, we go high.
Thinking, caring,
you are valuable,
working,
and powerful.
Sharing. Making the money,
Sisters.
having the time, giving a damn, giving a damn, giving a
When they go low, we go high.
If I wait too long to sing my song, close my eyes, pretend that it's not all wrong. Everything I had, everyone I know, all of it is gone. And I should have made a difference.
Fighting for what's right.
Someone's gotta make a difference. I could have made a difference. Someone's gotta make a difference. I should have made a difference. Someone's gotta make a difference. I could have. Someone's gotta make a difference. I should have made a difference. All of us make a difference.
Well, Sandy, I think that worked fine, more or less.
we go. If I can get myself off of mute.
Well, Joanna, we were trying to figure out if we could have a virtual watch party. You know, in other words, go back to our movie nights. And so it was kind of a test for that. Of course, you wouldn't have the bandwidth problems if we were just showing a DVD or.
Right.
Yeah, we might have bandwidth problems if we were showing something from